thousands of tubes where they would take ocean water up in sea chests and pump that freezing cold ocean water through those tubes so that when the steam came into contact with those cold tubes, it cooled it down, recondensed it back into steam, and they recondensed the steam back into water, and then pumped that water back to boilers to generate fresh steam all over again. Also, I'll point out here the control panel or the starting platform. This is where the engineers working in these areas were in communication with other areas, especially with the bridge. Something you find on all naval vessels are what we call redundancies, and they are precisely that. They're redundant. They're backup systems, because if something fails, you want to have a backup system so you can still do everything that you need to do. You see a little bit of redundancy right here, just in communication systems. Right here I'm pointing at a telephone. And if you look closely, you can actually see it's labeled as a loudophone, because when these engines were running, it was incredibly loud in these areas of the ship. So you'll notice that this telephone has a cup that goes over your mouth and over your ear so that you can hopefully still communicate over the din of these engines. But typically, when they wanted to communicate orders from the bridge to the engine room, they would use a telegraph. If you look over there, you see that brass instrument with the letter F above it? That's a telegraph. I think oftentimes people see those in TV shows or movies, and the sailors are moving those and they think they're actually operating the throttle for the engines or something like that. It's actually not it. It's actually just a communications device. The way those work is that there's a corresponding telegraph to each of the engines up at the bridge of the ship. And when they want to send orders to the engine room, first off, the officer will take the handle on his telegraph at the bridge and move it back and forth to ring the telegraph. So that would ring a bell on this telegraph to let them know they had orders coming in. Then they would move the handle to the position for the orders that they were giving. So let's say they moved their handle to full ahead steam. That would move the green arrow on this telegraph to that position to give these engineers their orders. Then they would match the arrow with the handle down here, and that would move the green arrow on the telegraph at the bridge to let the officers there know that these engineers have received their orders and were executing them. It was an electronic aye, yes sir. Then you notice the wheels below the telegraphs. That's what the engineers would actually have to turn to open and close valves to regulate the flow of steam to manipulate these engines. It's remarkable to look at the size of this engine room and realize that it would take only about 5 crew members to operate this area of the ship at any given time. Now, of course, there were 2 engine rooms, there were 5 boiler rooms, there was the crew at the bridge, so you probably had over 40 people meeting all the engineering needs of the ship on any given shift. This ship carried, what was it, 10 million gallons of fuel? She was hardly fuel efficient. This ship averaged about 13 feet per gallon. I'm sure you can imagine that adds up when you're crossing the ocean every week. Yeah. So she could make a 5-day voyage, but not much more than that. So when she traveled to Long Beach, she had to stop in ports and refuel all along the way because she couldn't carry 39 days worth of fuel.
Shelly, this one. Wait. Slow. Slow down. Good. Slow down.
Oh, my sticker. Oh, off again. Caesar does not like stickers. No, is there like still leftover like engine oil still in it? Or no? Or did they have to
I'm
drink?
sure there's some. I mean, I'm sure they did everything they could to get all of it out, but there's probably some remaining, just residual. And we know that we still have some lubricating oil in here because you might notice right above my head there's a bucket.
Oh yeah.
Because that seam there drips a little bit of that lubricating oil out, and so we have to keep this bucket because occasionally we have to empty this out.
And the thing is,
Drip.
I think that thing's getting full.
Yeah, no, I don't think it usually gets that far. We'd have to leave it for a long time because it's not dripping that much, but we just don't want that to come dripping down on one of us here. So. So now we are standing between the reduction gears. And you can actually see they removed the steel covers you see on this side and replaced them with plexiglass on this side so that we can look in there and actually see those double helical style gears. The teeth of these gears had to be individually fitted. They're very precise because you don't want any resistance. Everything has to be smooth and very precise. I had a guest on one of my tours who made the comment, he said, it's almost like this thing is like an enormous watch. And really, in its intricacy and precision, it really is. But these reduction gears, again, are what would take those high RPMs over 1,000 a minute and reduce them to about 172. Also, they've removed the tubes here, so you can look up inside these turbine housings on either side, and you can actually see the turbine itself. So you can see those hundreds of blades that would get struck by the steam to get these turbines spinning here. That's the first intermediate pressure turbine.
Yeah. What happened to the teeth? They're like
Damage. Yeah.
Is that just from what? Just using it?
Well, they made a mistake, is what happened.
What?
Yeah.
You're kidding me.
Nope. I have grinded my gears a few times, you know, shifting in my manual car. So I'll just point out, we're passing through these enormous gears here. These are called turning gears. And I'd just like to explain that these are actually not part of the propulsion system. When the ship was underway, these would be offline. These would not be engaged. They would only engage these turning gears when the ship's engines were being warmed up or cooled down. And what these would do is they would turn very slowly. It would take almost 10 minutes for this turning gear to make a complete revolution, but that would keep the machinery of the engines turning slowly to avoid any distortion or warping that could occur during the heating up and cooling down of the engines during those temperature changes. So that's what those were used for. When we go past those, you'll see another important part of the ship, and it's labeled. They have it stamped, main thrust bearing. When the screws turn, they are, of course, pushing water away from them. But that creates a counterforce of energy, and that energy travels through the propeller and up the propeller shaft here to the main thrust bearing. So this is where the energy is being transmitted from the shafts to the ship itself. So it's more or less where the propeller shafts push the ship forward through the water.
You know, how many per gallons of water? How many per gallons of water going through this?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. How many gallons of water?
Yeah, just going through the system.
Which part of the system? Through the boilers?
Yeah.
I honestly don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Now,
Yeah, that's steel. And this is thick steel. Yeah, this is really thick.
and those are the
The shafts. These are the propeller shafts.
those things probably weigh over billions of tons.
Billions, I don't know, but they're heavy. That's
I
a
mean,
lot
it's
of tons.
heavy. I mean, that's like heavy steel. They have to have
It
a
is.
crane.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, those shipyards, you can see they have enormous
Yeah.
cranes. So now we are in Propeller Shaft Alley. So we can see the two starboard side propeller shafts. The other two are over on the port side of the ship. And so those would be actually turning when the ship was underway to turn the screws, the propellers themselves. These shafts were polished to a mirror finish. And believe it or not, that polishing all had to be done by hand. So that was a real character building experience for these crew members. I imagine that's a job they gave to the new guys till they earned a little
Oh my god, that has to be
respect.
hard.
Yeah, absolutely. But they had to keep them polished and lubricated so that they would turn as smoothly as possible. You didn't want any resistance in that transfer of energy. The steel of these propeller shafts is quite thick. It's about 11 inches thick. But there is a hollow core at the center, which does allow for some flexibility of this steel. I was talking with a naval captain who explained to me that on the aircraft carrier he captained, when the propellers were turning at full speed, the torque that was created was so great that the steel of the propeller shafts could twist up to 180 degrees, which I just found hard to believe. And I was still thinking about it a couple of days later when I was talking with another gentleman who was an engineer. And so I asked him about that, and he was kind of blasé about it. He was like, oh yeah, sure. What you have to realize is that's over, 200 feet. And so incrementally that twisting becomes more exaggerated. But still, it's just remarkable to me to think about the brilliant engineers that can take all these factors into consideration and build something as remarkable as the Queen Mary.
Yeah, why are these not working?
I don't know. Probably because it's expensive to fix them.
Well, they should fix them anyways.
Look, I'm in favor of it, but I also don't have the money to
No,
pay
I
for
know,
it.
but I'm just saying, I mean.
We are going to go with the next one, too.
That was the reason we'll have to prove it down to.
I'm afraid not. That's aftermarket. I just want to make sure she can get that
Yeah, I know.
part up here, because that might be a little tricky.
Hey, it's big enough you can slide it on top of it.
I'm just waiting to see if they'll need any help with that. Oh, it looks like it's fit. Okay, I thought it might be too narrow to...
Okay, it's great.
You know, one thing that would be cool is to see those pistons.
This ship didn't have pistons. This was a turbine engine ship. Yeah, you're thinking the Titanic had pistons, but the Queen Mary had the turbines. Would you like a hand with that? Can I help you?
Yeah,
Okay. Just because I know it's narrow, it's not too easy.
just grab it from the bars.
Yep. Here?
Yeah.
Is that good?
Thanks. Straight up, because I got stuff in it.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome, of course. Well, when I hit the escalator, I'm like, it's kind of narrow. I was afraid it might not fit.
There's one more escalator.
Yeah, there's one more.
But you'll be okay.
I'm just going to switch my hold here and I'll get it.
But you
Do you want
have
it
these
for here?
Yeah, that's good.
Let's
Okay.
get you over there.
Thank you.
Of course.
It's good now.
How many stairs do you think this one has
I think that's
in this
higher, but
boat?
it's still getting up.
In the whole ship?
Yeah.
don't know the answer, yeah.
Over here.
Yeah, I know that.
Try that again.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Right up the stairs. Sorry about holding up.
Oh, please don't apologize. I'm sorry, we'll put you through such a workout here.
Did you notice I've been sitting when you're talking?
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Hi, Philia.
I know, I should get one of these for just
Girl,
for,
Mama.
Yeah.
or like one of those canes with a stool on it or something.
That's it. That's
Yeah,
the
that's
last
good.
thing.
We're like a
Sorry about that, everybody.
I think we're all doing well. All right.
A lot of calories burning, but.
Now especially. You all right?
Yeah, you can sit now.
I think she's good now. I'm good. I feel like people should sit again. I'll make her sit.
Where's Barry?
I think they're ahead
They're
of
in there?
Yeah, I couldn't. They told them to go ahead of us. It's gonna be a while because of her. Okay.
So I just wanted to point this out because here we can see another redundancy. This is another backup system, and this is a redundancy for piloting the ship. I don't know if any of you made it up to the wheelhouse today, but if you go to the bridge of the ship, what you see up there is that there are 3 wheels. And they're redundant. They're backups to one another. So if any one of them needs repair or maintenance, they always have a functioning wheel. And aside from the 3 wheels at the bridge, there were 3 other wheels back here at the aft end of the ship. So the Queen Mary had a total of 6 helms that could pilot the vessel. Now, of course, if you're piloting from here, you can't see where you're going, but they would do the same as pilots have to do when they have zero visibility. They'd use their instruments. And so they have their navigational systems, their compasses, their communications, their telegraphs, and they could pilot the vessel from here. The 5 primary wheels, the 3 at the bridge, this one, and the one at the docking bridge, operated the hydraulics for the Queen Mary. And actually, it's interesting to see this is still attached to the gearing. So when I turn it, if you look at the gears right there, you can see they still move. But these would control the hydraulic cylinders. And when we go back aft, just a little bit behind where we are now, you'll see those hydraulic cylinders, those huge steering rams. And those were basically the power steering for the Queen Mary. The rudder of the ship was enormous. The ship was steered by a single rudder, one big fin sticking into the water. That rudder was 3 stories tall and weighed over 100 tons. I've read some books that have it listed at as much as 140 tons. So I'm sure you can imagine that having some assistance in turning that rudder was helpful. However, the 6th wheel was a big wheel that was mounted here. And it was big because that was there as a redundancy in case the hydraulics failed. So they'd have to get 3 or 4 crewmen for the muscle on that, and then they'd have a whole team of guys working to move the tiller to turn the rudder of the ship manually.
This is awesome.
I think the knowledge of that system was just a motivator to make sure that the guys that maintained the hydraulics did a good job so that it never came to that. But when we go back aft here, you'll see those big steering rams, those hydraulic cylinders, and you can notice in between them is a sign that says rudder head. That shows you where the top of the rudder was located. So we're at the aft end of the ship.
Just 800.
Lexi, let him go so we can be.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, Alexi.
Come on, Richard. Go.
Yeah, come on, Richard.
We were just in here.
No, it's a tight squeeze.
I got this trick.
Whoop.
What, shall we?
No, she's getting caught. Whoop. Get it? Nope, she's got it. Tight squeeze.
I'm afraid I'm gonna knock my head.
Yeah, give Richard down here.
Is there water still, or is there like mud? Like, is it?
So the ship floats. So yeah, so below the keel is water. Yeah, we still rise and fall with the tides. You can really tell when you come aboard at high tide because the angles of the walkways coming aboard the ship are at a steeper incline because she will rise with the tide and she sinks. So she doesn't bottom out, but there's not a lot of clearance to the bottom. Because the thing is, if the ship hit bottom, we'd list one way or the other. You know, she'd roll somehow. So we are still floating.
So has that ever happened where you guys gotten really close to like where it could?
I don't believe so. I mean, certainly not since I've been here, and I've been here like 12 years. So no, I don't think so. But they had to dredge this part of the bay for the Queen Mary to fit because she drafts so deeply. And we do get cruise ships that dock behind us here, and the really big ones can't fit in our bay. They have to go over to San Pedro because there is only so much. I think the bay is only something like 45 feet deep, something like that.
Yo,
It's not terrible.
Alexi,
So we're not far from the bottom.
you just missed it. I just had
No,
a
she doesn't hit bottom.
damn probe just
Like,
went
does the weather, when the
for.
weather's really bad, can you ever feel like the waves? Can you ever feel like?
I never feel it myself, but I've had people tell me
Hey,
even
about 3 or
on calm
4.
days that they can feel the ship floating. I guess maybe I'm just not that perceptive. I don't know. I've never noticed it. But some people say that they have. And I did, one of my coworkers even told me there was one day where they were having a really bad storm and she was feeling almost nauseous, kind of seasick from the moving of it. But I've honestly never noticed. So I wanted to show you the propeller here. I want to go into the propeller box. Because of course everything we've talked about ultimately leads up to
See
the
that?
propellers, to the screws of the ship.
Dude.
We burn fuel to heat up water, to make steam, to power engines, to turn these propellers. A couple things I want to point out before we go in here. First off, I'd just like to explain that when we step through this opening, we are stepping off of the Queen Mary.